So what do these words we've been using this morning, set free, mean to you? Our readings today have all kinds of descriptions of ways to be set free from oppression, from bondage, and just set free from everyday routine. Celebrating the Sabbath sets us free from everyday work to worship God and to take a rest. When was the last time you called the Sabbath a delight, like the reading in Isaiah said? My father worked in retail. He was a manager for May Company department stores, famous bar in St. Louis, almost his whole career. And I can remember very clearly as a teenager my mother's great dismay when May and other stores decided to stay open on Sundays, once what was called the Blue Laws were repealed in Missouri. Before that, Sunday was his only guaranteed day off, other than major holidays like Christmas and Easter. And true to her predictions, when there was a new store opening, Sunday was no longer a day off for my dad. And that went through the rest of his career. You know, now I work for a church, and Sunday isn't exactly my Sabbath occurrence because I'm working and yet I'm not working. I mean, Sunday is semi-restful, especially when I'm not preaching, but leading worship can be a joy and a delight. But there's an awareness that I keep when I'm up here instead of where you all are that I don't call exactly Sabbath rest. That I have to find some other time and some other way. The Pharisees, the leaders of the synagogue, were clear to Jesus on what they thought Sabbath rest ought to look like. Even today, Jewish rules about not working on the Sabbath can be very strict. In areas where there is a conservative or Orthodox synagogue, if you look up outside, you might find what looks like fishing line, strung from the poles like telephone or electrical poles. Those lines mark the area where walking on the Sabbath to and from worship isn't far enough to be considered work. In a devout household, not only is the kitchen set up to accommodate kosher rules, but ovens may have a timer so that food can be put in before the Sabbath starts, and the oven will turn on and turn off at the right time, baking or roasting dinner, so that the homeowner does not have to do that work. Because the rules were very clear. Don't do any work on the Sabbath. For the leader of the synagogue where Jesus healed this woman, this was a violation of the rule. Healing her was work. You know, I find it interesting, though, that the leader doesn't speak directly to Jesus first. Maybe because he knew he wasn't going to have any effect. He talks to the crowd, the worshipers there, and said, "Can't you get your healing done the other 6 days of the week?" Putting it on them somehow. And he doesn't even have an answer when Jesus turns the law onto his own side, arguing that even the strictest of Sabbath laws allow saving a life or making a life better, be it human or animal. I'm really surprised, though, that Jesus didn't use one more argument, that healing for him wasn't work. It was delight. It's one of the strongest ways that he shows he's about God's business in the world, making changes that other people can't make. I suspect healing on the Sabbath day was pure delight for Jesus. By the end of the story, the gospel tells us that the crowd was rejoicing in the wonderful things he was doing. And you know, that still happens. We can still rejoice in the wonderful things that God is doing. Only now, God usually has to use our hands and feet, our minds and bodies to do the work. Our presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton in the ELCA, is fond of pointing out how God is working in the church and through other ordinary human beings. What is God up to among us is the way she puts it. And I can tell you God was up to a lot when I was in Milwaukee, now a couple weeks ago, for the church-wide assembly that week of August 4th. Being at a church-wide assembly is an odd mix of work and delight, Sabbath and toil. Imagine a congregational meeting like the one we're going to have in September that will last, about an hour, but it lasts 5 days. Yeah. We took breaks to eat and sleep, to worship, and had about 2 hours a day otherwise to just gather our thoughts and not do anything. But otherwise, it was talking and listening, voting on resolutions, and lots of discussion about things as weighty as racism and as light as where to put the comma in the resolution. And there were definitely moments of delight. When I was looking through my pre-assembly material, I was looking at lists of folks from around the country who were going to be voting members, mostly trying to find other deacons that I don't usually get to hang with and I only see at things like this. I was happy to see that Pastor Adriana Johnson-Rivas, the pastor at our partner church in Houston, Principe de Paz, was going to be there too. Now, finding one person in a room full of 1,000 people is a challenge, even with the seating chart that they have by the door to tell you people from here are sitting there and people from there are sitting over here. But I got really lucky. When I walked into the dining hall on Monday, the first full day of the event, there were empty seats at a table that happened to contain 2 people from Pennsylvania that I already knew, and Pastor Adriana and her bishop from Texas. And it was so much fun. It was such a great time to be able to get to know her and to see that she is as much a delight in the Lord as I thought she was going to be. Before every important vote in the assembly, we prayed and we often sang a hymn before or after. On one of the votes on Interfaith Connections, we sang "This Little Light of Mine." When we finished, there was someone standing up and singing it in Spanish. When the screen focused on that person, there was Pastor Adriana. She was leading us in singing "This Little Light of Mine" in Spanish. And moments like that were the light moments, the lift my heart moments. I mean, there were also serious issues, mirroring some of the things out of the Isaiah lesson that we got today. Feeding the hungry, satisfying the needs of the afflicted. On our place at the table every day when we came in was something in the way of a gift. One day it was a CD of a documentary on understanding Islam from a Christian perspective. One day it was the ELCA's new prayer book to go into prisons that we can buy and send to prisons, or we can acquire for anybody that we know who is either a prison chaplain or a prison inmate. Early one day, it was a button. I'm actually wearing mine because it's not a great picture, but around the world, people are calling for attention to gender-based violence by wearing black on Thursdays. In our prep information for assembly, our synod folks were told about this in advance so that we could have a black outfit if we wish to participate. I learned a lot about our neighbors in that week, what the ELCA is good at, and where we have room for improvement. There's all kinds of that going on. For example, we do very well at calling folks' attention to stuff. My people, the deacons especially, are good at standing in that place between church and the world and pointing out where we have common ground and how we can help each other. I like especially that promise from Isaiah today, that if we follow God, we can become the restorer of streets to live in. Here's our group at Churchwide Assembly on Thursday in our black outfits, and we met close to the font at worship, which I've said before, and I know I'll say again, is one of the best things about the assemblies like this. Imagine 1,000 of your new best friends from every part of the U.S. and from other countries, the visitors that come to us, singing in harmony and praising God. We got a mini Sabbath for about 90 minutes every day. And I know y'all believe that worship should only take an hour, but when you have preachers from as far away as Tanzania and as close as Chicago and over 900 people taking communion each day, Even with 15 stations for communion, it takes a while. But it is a beautiful experience. And if you ever have the chance, I would urge you to take it. But whether it's 1,000 people meeting in Milwaukee or 100 people in Agora Hills, we do still have work to do. We will always have work to do until Jesus comes back, and then it'll be a different but more joyful work. Until then, we need to be feeding people, restoring them to wellness, and walking with them on the hard roads every day. For New Hope, that's going to include some more mental health ministry stuff that I'll be happy to talk to anybody about outside of worship who wants to talk about that some more. If I start now, though, it'll be another 10 or 20 minutes, and I won't wrap up. And while that will cause me to delight in the Sabbath, I expect it's not your idea of delight. May God's grace be with us all. Amen.